for me, trying to do volunteer work and building connections in a new community that way through volunteer work was really helpful. But you have to put yourself out. It doesn't happen as naturally as it did when I was 20 or 30.
Welcome to the After Chapter podcast. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Cecilia. We explore who you are when the roles fall away
And pour into what's next, one conversation at a time. So, before we get into today's conversation, you know what we do, Cecilia. We always start with our pour moment. And for today's episode, we are going to have an espresso martini made with Mr. Black.
Loving this. As you can see, I'm a big fan of the espresso martini because it's all about the contrast. It's the bitter and the smooth. It's energizing and soothing. It wakes you up, but also asks that you slow down.
Absolutely. So Mr. Black, it's a coffee liqueur. I believe it is from Australia. As you just said, it's not overly sweet, and it's made with real coffee. So it doesn't soften the edges or try to disguise the flavor. Which feels really right for today's episode, which is identity theft. Who are we without the title or the ring? And so the conversation isn't about glossing things over or rushing to redefine ourselves. So with that, cheers.
Let's cheers.
Take a sip.
And take
cheers.
a sip to our special guest. I'm so excited.
Well, cheers. I will raise my guava juice to your beer.
Absolutely.
So healthy. This is
fresh.
really good.
So as I mentioned, okay, calm down. So as I mentioned, today's conversation really is about identity theft, not the digital kind or, identity theft in terms of, fraudulent checks, which happened to me last week, which I didn't even share with you.
We'll have to have that conversation.
But that's a different conversation. But it's identity theft around what happens when the roles and relationships that once defined us, they fall away. So we are so excitedly joined today by Tom Christofferson, who has lived through some of those transitions and unraveling in terms both professionally and personally. So Tom, we are super excited for you to be here.
Oh, it's great to be back with you both again. But I wish you were here in Hawaii with me. That would be more fun.
Yeah, I wish that too.
That is an understatement right now.
We are in the midst of winter here. Okay? So we have no palm trees in our background.
Well, it's only 72 degrees here, but a little cloudy. So it's not, it isn't
I
perfect.
feel sad for you.
Thank
No.
you. A little more guava juice, I'll be fine.
So with that, maybe Tom, could you introduce yourself to the audience a little bit?
Sure.
Cecilia and we can share that, we know Tom from our days of working at a financial institution, JP Morgan Chase, and that's how we met Tom some years ago. But if you could just introduce yourself, where you are now.
Yes. Okay. So I was at Morgan for 18 years, I think. And I think we overlapped about 10 of those years at least.
Yeah.
And got to know each other through a number of the diversity projects that we did. And it was, I think of that time in my life and that experience as a real highlight. It was an exciting time to be at JP Morgan, but it was also just a great time of growth personally and professionally for me and for the firm, and the chance to work with you. Let's see. So most of my career was in global banks, in the investment banking side with either institutional asset management or the products that the bank sold to institutional asset managers. And so the great thing about that was it gave me a chance to work all around the world with just amazing people as our clients and colleagues across the world. And so when I left there, I joined some former colleagues at another financial services firm, and that experience was not quite as exciting as JP Morgan and ended in a way that I had not expected. So, we talk about some of those changes. Um, and also a nearly 20-year relationship, personal relationship ended right around the same time that I was leaving Morgan. So lots of changes
Yeah.
happened, and they weren't necessarily ones I would have chosen for myself. Um, and so, I guess we'll talk about it, but I now live in Phoenix. I work with some other friends in a small private equity fund, which is substantially less lucrative and a lot more fun.
Oh,
Well, great.
fun is important.
It
Fun is
is.
important. No, you talk about the changes happening at the same time, right?
Yeah,
So change in career, change in relationship, things that you didn't plan on, and here you are having to make a pivot
yep,
and move in a way that, again, had you known this was happening, you could have prepared in a different way versus
true,
it's
true,
happening and you're not prepared.
right. And I thought on the professional side, I thought I was prepared because it has some changes in the structure of the bank. I had moved into a different role after, I guess, 15 or 16 years with Morgan. I was moved into a different function because they were changing the way that global sales roles, eliminating global sales roles and making them regional. And so I ended up in a role that was a global marketing role for the equities division and some other parts of the investment bank. And that was fine because equities is more of a wholesale sale. It's not B2C in the sense it's more B2B. And so it was fun to have that experience of learning some things I had not worked with as closely before. But the writing was sort of on the wall that this was probably not going to be a long-term career place. And so it kind of, there was the firm gave me an opportunity to sort of smoothly uh, take an early retirement and kind of move things in the function so that they could be taken over in a different way. So that I thought I was prepared for that. I thought it was great, but I discovered pretty quickly that not knowing what my next thing was going to be was a challenge in a whole lot of ways. And obviously the one that I think we're really focused on in some ways tonight is you, um, I reported to a member of the management committee of the firm. So, I was a participant in the annual kickoff for senior leaders of the firm when Jamie Dimon would have
Mm.
400 senior leaders of the firm together to talk about what was going to go on and what we need to do. And suddenly not only was I not in that group, I wasn't associating with, the top financial services executives in the
Mm.
world. And and so that was like, oh, who am I if I don't have that title on my business card? And if people don't actually think maybe they should instinctively think I might have something worthwhile to say. So in a sense, it's kind of like going back to the beginning of your career where you're proving your worth in a very different way every day. And that can be exciting, but it can also be dispiriting to feel like you're starting over again. So I definitely think there were things I could have done that would have prepared me better if I had really planned that out more effectively.
We prepare for the things, that we think will be happening in our lives. But, some of the things you talked about both professionally and personally are things that perhaps, you don't necessarily think about because you don't
Right.
think it's going to happen, and or you may not think it's going to happen at this time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it is, Cecilia and I have talked about in previous episodes about your identity and also trying to understand who you are as an individual when
Yeah.
you don't have a title to describe yourself, and you can't describe yourself as a partner or a
Right.
brother or a father, or whatever that caretaker or family title is, and
Right.
can be really difficult to have that identity when
Yes.
you remove those titles away. And so
Yeah.
this background that you're giving us, having such a big job
Mm-hmm.
at Morgan, and that being taken away from you, and as you said, in terms of your personal life,
Right.
Right.
something unexpected.
One of my older brothers lost his wife
Mm,
after something approaching 50 years of marriage, maybe slightly more,
Wow.
passed away of health issues. It wasn't sudden; it was about a year-long period, but the severity of it and how that changed their lives during that year, and then suddenly he was a widower, and
yeah.
so the interesting thing is, I felt like the end of my relationship and the passing of his wife weren't exactly the same,
Mm,
but the process of grieving
yeah.
was exactly the same.
Right.
Yeah.
That the structure of your life is suddenly different,
Hmm.
and for me, one of the joys of life is having someone to share it with,
Hmm.
and that suddenly being gone was far harder than the professional changes, and there were plenty of challenges with those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And navigating both of those at the same time, right?
I
Particularly
wouldn't recommend it.
no, no, I give it a 1 out of 10, right? No, I don't. And also the thing that what I appreciate about what Michelle just said, particularly for you, Tom, is not only that you had a big role and a big career at Morgan. Morgan is a brand, and
Yeah,
so when you're connected, I remember when I left from the bank as well after being there for 14 years. So many people were like, "What are you going to do?" Because they defined me
right.
as a person because I repped the bank so hard.
Yes,
My hat, I had my quarter zip, I had all of the attire, and suddenly I'm no longer affiliated. So one, it's my
yes,
job that I no longer have, so I no longer have that title, but I'm no longer affiliated with this brand name that
right.
resonates so
Hmm.
strongly.
And we used to say, on the sales and relationship management side, um, it isn't hard to get someone to take your call. I mean, they may not know you, but they know
Know the
JP
brand.
Morgan.
Yeah.
And so say, I'm Tom Christopherson calling from JP Morgan. Would like to stop by and visit next week. Would you be available? Yes. I mean,
Mhm.
nobody says no to that.
Right.
And it's very different when you suddenly don't have the brand name behind you.
Tom, that's a good point to talk about, right? So and again, for those of us who have left, right? So we're mourning the loss. I'm going to use the word mourn,
Yeah.
the loss of the title and the connection to the
Yeah.
organization. And what you just talked about is how people respond. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I would love to hear once you pivoted away, what were the reactions from those who knew you and saw you in this one
Right.
dimension?
It's interesting because the people that you meet in a new career, new role, haven't had that experience with you. And so some of the things that you think are givens from having spent 2 decades, with this particular structure and title and responsibility, um, that isn't there. And it's sort of like, yeah, who are you? And so it's an interesting change. I'll tell you though, the great thing that goes with you though in the change is relationships you built. So some client relationships that had become close friendships over the years, relationships with colleagues like the two of you, that we may not talk every week, but there's such fondness and a willingness to connect again and catch up and see what's going on. So the relationships don't, if you built them, if you invested in them, don't go away. But the title on the card did.
Yeah. Yeah.
What can you share in terms of, I guess, those first few moments, your first few weeks, months after those transition? And you can pick both,
Yeah.
professionally or personally, that surprised you most.
Well, I because both of these things were happening essentially simultaneously, I decided to give myself a completely new start
Mm,
and moved from Connecticut to California.
okay.
Mm.
Oh,
So again, maybe not everybody's approach to this, but I
you're
just
like,
felt like,
rip the Band-Aid off. Let's just start over.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
exactly. I feel like, okay, I don't, professionally, I don't need to be, in New York.
Right.
Hmm.
Um, Personally, it might be better to be able to have uh, a new place to start off and
Hmm.
feel like I'm creating something fresh
Yeah.
rather than kind of wallowing in what isn't there.
Hmm.
So that has its pluses and minuses. It's if you have a friend group you can build on, that makes it a lot easier. It's
Yes.
tough if you're starting from scratch unless you
Yeah.
are much more gregarious than I am. But
Yeah. And I was going to ask you that when you moved, did you have a community?
Yeah.
I
And is
did.
that why you chose to move to California?
It
Okay.
is, and it's so like I knew I had the starting point of a friend base that I could then expand over time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then eventually I ended up moving to Phoenix and same thing there. Had a group of friends to start with and have been able to grow that over time as well.
Mhm.
It's, I'm involved in my local congregation and that
Hmm.
really helps. So it feels
Yeah.
like that's one way that I can connect with people. It's, I
Mhm.
sometimes say I'm bilingual. I speak gay and LDS. so so I have a group of friends in my church and a group of friends in my gay community and some of them are in common and most are not.
Mhm.
But
Right.
it's fine. I really enjoy both aspects of that in my life.
Speaking of that particular first moments, first
Yeah.
months of those moves, what can you say? Or, we always say we are not experts in
Right.
these topics. This
Hmm.
is always a conversation and
Yep.
speaking to people that have lived experiences. And so, what can you share in terms of specifically those first few moments, first few months, as I mentioned, in for the
Yeah.
audience as to kind of what to
Processing it. Yeah.
expect,
Right.
process how you process to
Yeah.
figure out, what a move is going to be best for me. But
Sure.
what are some of the things perhaps you weighed upon to make a decision?
So, one thing is that this was the first time in my career that I didn't go directly from one job to the next, or hadn't been essentially recruited from one job into the next job.
Mhm.
So it was here I am 30 some odd years into the career, and for the very first time, had to sort of say, well, actually, what do I want to do?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
if I'm not just responding to somebody else's knock on the door to say, hey, come join us.
Hmm.
So, and I had a very clear idea of what I didn't want to do. And it took me a lot longer to figure out what I did want to do,
Yeah.
which made the process of getting the next job a little longer than it probably needed to be. So one thing I would say, like, I could have prepared myself better in that sense to
Mm.
just say, these are the sorts of things I'm going to want to do in a next chapter of my career. And so I need to put some things in place to help me do that more easily. So, and that is, people connections, but it's also,
Right.
buffing up the resume in some particular areas that have then become interesting. And
Yeah.
then on a personal basis, it was creating some new friendships, but it was also a good friend of mine said to me, you've always wanted to write a book. Why don't you make that your focus right now,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and do that? And so I jumped into that, and it ended up
Right.
being a really fun thing to do. And I wrote a second book after, and they're not. They never made the New York Times bestseller list, to be sure,
It's
but
still.
but it did open doors to some new friendships
Right.
and some different opportunities to get involved with groups and topics, especially on the LGBT side. So that was. I'm not sure I would have planned that necessarily,
Yeah.
but having friends who know you well and have your best interests at heart uh,
Hmm.
can be a great. They can be great sounding boards and give you some courage and ideas.
And that's something that we hadn't planned to talk about, but I do think it's important to talk about the net worth of your network,
Oh,
right?
very
And
good.
so the people who, again, as I hear you tell this story, with each move, you had a community there to welcome you.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine navigating those changes without having that support, right? And so when you move from And even just as you think about your own identity, which at one point is very public, and now you're
Right.
shifting to this private aspect of looking at your life. But again, having the people around you who know you, who can challenge you, who can ask the questions of you is so key.
I'm sure you've seen the same research I have that men of a certain age tend to stop making friends. And so, that's I'm grateful that hasn't been my experience, but it is definitely harder
Mhm.
than it was when I wasn't in the office every day, interacting with people in a formal sense that way, and having lots of social relationships at work. And so, there it's a different, at least in my experience, there's a different style of building the network after a specific career has you in an office setting all day, every day,
Mhm.
let alone if you're doing, for me, trying to do volunteer work and building connections in a new community that way through volunteer work was really helpful. But you have to put yourself out. It doesn't happen as naturally as it did when I was 20 or 30
Right.
or whatever.
Right. You know, I think also, I'll give a different perspective in the sense of perhaps someone listening to this or watching the podcast may think, well, it's easier for Tom to make friends because that was part of his role
Yeah.
He's
at work.
outgoing.
He had
Right.
to build relationships, and so he's built that muscle, that skill. So for me, you know, yeah, Sam, here, I that's not who I am
Yeah.
naturally, whether, at this age, whatever that age is, or when I was younger. And so it might be a bit difficult for some to
Sure.
build that community. And yes, it may
Yeah.
happen when you're at a certain age, but it
Yeah.
might be that much harder for some people because it's just not innate
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
them to do that. And so,
It's a
um,
fair point.
yeah, and so, and would love to hear your thoughts around this.
Yeah.
Cecilia and I talked about in our very first episode about auditing your energy
Mhm.
and just paying attention to the things
Yes.
and not waiting until the transition happens, but just in your day to day, auditing the things that fill you, the things
Yes.
that where time moves, pretty fast because you're
You're in
so
that flow
engaged,
state.
yeah,
Right.
in whatever that thing is you're doing, and paying attention to that. So, how you had, as you mentioned, in terms of writing the book, you had that
Yeah.
community that really knew you well to say and encourage you to do so.
Yes.
So, but if, I guess if you didn't necessarily have that community, are there ways or
Mhm.
how could you have figured out some of the things that fulfill you, such as you mentioned, writing or
Right.
volunteering and things of that nature?
So I think I used to describe myself as professionally extroverted and personally introverted. Like
Mhm.
I had a role to play,
Yeah.
so I could go be gregarious and whatever I needed to do as in that role. But I personally, I'm kind of a private person who could probably be a hermit if left to my own devices.
Alone, right?
So I know kind of what that is. So I do have to force myself um, when it's a choice, right? It's
Yeah.
not if
Yeah.
it's not professionally required, then I have to say no. I am a happier person when I have relationships of trust and people that are where it's more than surface deep. And so then it's okay. Then I need to invest some time in that and in trying to put myself in a place where I can meet people who have similar interests. And
Mhm.
that's for me, that's volunteering has helped a lot with that because I feel like it's not about me. I'm not trying to go introduce myself. I'm joining a group who's trying to accomplish a purpose that's useful in a community. And so I'm just one of the people there trying to make that happen. But it allows for informal conversations that don't feel so big. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like I've got to go in and introduce myself and tell my life story, whatever. Just we can sort of chuckle about how slow I am putting those 25 articles in the bag or, whatever it might be.
Yes.
No, that's, what that also speaks to, Tom. One, I really want to acknowledge the fact that you didn't sit in the corner and let loneliness
Yeah.
take over, right? Because I can see moving from a big space to a smaller space, and particularly if you're, and I forget what the new term is, right? Right, it's extrovert and introvert. I think it's omvert is the new
Oh,
one,
yeah, something like
right?
that. Yeah, I know what you're
It's
talking
the one
about. Yeah,
where as you said, right, you are extroverted in your profession
right.
because you have to be, but then given your druthers, you would be an introvert and enjoy the peace and quiet.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also particularly when you have a job that demands you to be so extroverted, you want to
Yeah.
that peace and quiet, but not going to your introversion as your
Yeah.
go-to. And I do think that there's something to be said. And as we have been dropping breadcrumbs and thought starters for people to think about, that volunteering, we talked about having a hobby, and maybe you don't
Yeah.
have a hobby, but there's always someone that you can give something to, and it takes the focus off of you and puts
Right.
the focus on that community that you're trying to serve, that individual who's benefiting from your being there.
And it also just, for me, and I think for you too, based on the interactions we've had over the years, it just, it feels so much better to be able to not be totally self-focused, but to really feel like something that you're doing is of use to the world. Like none of us are president of the United States, and don't we wish we could change that? But anyway, but yeah, but, but so our circles are a little smaller. But nonetheless, even in a small circle, to me, it just feels good to feel like something that I can do something that contributes to somebody else's well-being, or that because of the opportunities I've had, there might be some way that I could contribute that actually is something that someone else wouldn't be able to get on their own.
I love this because as you both were speaking, it just made me think about building your community is a byproduct of doing something that's not focused on you.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's a byproduct that, will benefit you, going forward, whether that is professionally or personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dating, on the other hand, is a different story.
Tell me about it.
Oh my gosh.
I'm gonna
I
drink
didn't-
again.
I didn't start dating again until like 5 or 6 years after the relationship ended. I just had no desire to. Well, it was mourning. I was in mourning.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
I was
And
just going to
so-
say, I
It's a
think that's
loss.
part of the grieving. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, at a certain age in the gay community, you're invisible. So trying to date as an invisible person is also another challenge. But that's the reason that came to my mind is, in a volunteer construct, you do have that very natural way to focus outside of yourself. It's really hard to make that same leap in dating, where it's the constant reintroduction of who you are and
Right.
what you like and da da
Yeah.
da. Trying to find that out about someone else, and I don't know. I have not cracked the code on that.
These are when these hobbies really come in. You have to talk about the hobbies, what you're passionate about.
Find the common interests.
How do I
Okay.
introduce myself without the title?
Okay, Michelle, you need to be my dating coach.
Oh, I am no expert, but through the conversations, I'm, learning a little bit more.
I do want to, before we shift and pivot to another part of the conversation, I do want to talk about, Tom, though, that in between,
Yeah.
right? So leaving relationship, leaving title, and before you found your purpose, your new opportunity,
Yeah.
the moving, as you're sitting in that in between, what were some of the things that you said? You talked about when it came to your career, you knew some of the things that you did not want to do, but
Yes.
you weren't sure in what you wanted to do. So as you were going through that phase, can you talk a little bit about some of your thought process or some of the activities that you
Yeah.
did take stock.
You know what? And it also related to compensation. So the things the job I knew I could get most easily that would be most comparable in compensation was going to be sales relationship management. And I just felt like I had done that um, as long as I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And so then I had to say, okay, if I really want to do something differently, then I've also got to say it's not going to pay me in the same way that my expertise had allowed me to be compensated over time. And so I was like, well, okay. But then, what does that mean in reality in terms of, how much I spend? And so that was one thing. And it's a little thing, but it's real.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
and
very
then the
real.
other was I really valued a style of organization where you work with smart, sparky people, and and there's by and large a goodwill. It's not zero sum game internally. It's a let's work together so we can all win. And that wasn't perfect at JP Morgan, but it was pretty darn good most of the time,
Mhm.
at least in my experience. And so I also knew that whatever I did, I wanted to find an organization that had those same sorts of values,
Yeah.
where people wanted to help each other, work with each other, and you felt like you were growing because you were working with smart people.
Hmm.
Right, right.
So that was part of the thing. Okay, well, if I don't want to do exactly what I've been doing, that probably means I won't be working in the same industry or for the firms I competed with. So some of the easiest jobs to have might not be where I'm headed. So how will I find the other firms and the places where I could work? And over time, what I've sort of figured out is, at least for me at this stage, smaller is better.
Hmm.
So it works better if I can feel like I really know the people that I'm working with, and we're not big enough to have the luxury of screwing around.
Hmm.
You really have to make it count. You have to make your time count, and everybody's got to pull their weight. And so that's been something I really enjoyed. I had been in institutional asset management, but I had never done private equity or hedge funds. I'd worked to support hedge funds through our prime brokerage business, but it wasn't a deep expertise. And so I was really hesitant about, do I bring enough to this kind of a role that's where I can feel like I'm carrying my weight. And so it's been a learning curve, and for me that's kind of energizing to feel like I'm back. It's not on autopilot. I have to really go ask somebody stuff, half the time, and say, wait a minute, I haven't done this before. How do we do this?
A few years ago, I had lost my father. And so friends who have gone through loss had said to the family, like, when you go through a loss, whether that is death, whether it's a
Yeah.
divorce, you should don't make big life
Hmm.
changes. Give yourself a year
Yeah.
before, you know, changing something drastically. And so, so my question for you is that in between, and,
Yeah.
conducting that audit of the things I like, the things I don't want,
Yeah.
I'd want to work somewhere that's smaller.
Yeah.
And I, have build relationships, smart people, all those things. What was your
Hmm.
time frame
Yeah.
before, and also even just moving to the
Yeah.
West Coast, what was your time frame in making these changes or having an understanding of the things you want or don't want?
So I had 6 months notice that the changes were coming, I'd say,
Okay.
Okay.
before they were official.
Yes.
So I had 6 months at that point to think about, moving and starting fresh physically as well as emotionally
Mm.
and professionally. And so it wasn't quite as instant as it sounds, in the fact that my actual employment with JP Morgan ended March 31st and I moved to California on April 15th. But so
Hey.
it was, It was
Like a year.
a little more involved than that, but it wasn't a full
Okay.
year. You know but Michelle, when you talk about the thing that really, um, I thought, okay, I really want to be you know,
Hmm.
I've been working at this pace and I want to travel. I want to just be able to go visit friends. My parents had both died in the 3 years prior to me making these changes. And so, and I grieved also that I had not been able to spend the time with them in their last years that I would have liked to. You know, they lived in the West and I lived in the East. And so I could um, see them regularly, but it wasn't the same thing as being able to hop over and make sure everything was working.
Yeah.
Um, Fortunately, I have brothers who lived nearby, and even more fortunately, their neighbor, who was almost like a daughter to them, lost her job, and
Hmm.
so I was able to say, "Hey, can I hire you to
Right.
Mm.
just be mom and dad's gopher and
Hmm.
checking in on them every day and do whatever they need?" And I don't know how we would have gotten through
Right.
both of their illnesses had we not had her. And she could, there's no way I could ever have paid her enough for what she did, because what she did was love them,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I'm
Oh.
just so grateful. But I felt like I had missed some opportunities because of kind of the pace of the career and everything else. And so I really wanted to take some time to be completely free to do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And I realized fairly like 3, 4 months later, yes, I was exercising more, but that was 2 hours of a 24-hour day. And one day, as I was sitting there laying on my bed, watching the third movie in a row, this is not really what I planned. And
Right.
I don't think I want this to last forever. So, so I did get some downtime that I didn't necessarily use particularly productively. But it also was, you know, everybody's got to find their own way to just untangle and unwind.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And maybe 3 movies in a day was mine. But it
Right.
definitely, like I now ride my bike. That's why I live in Phoenix, because I can do it practically every day of the year. And I try to ride between 100 and 120 miles a week. And so again, it's only a couple hours a day, but it has changed. You know, I'm so much healthier now than I was,
Yeah.
you know, the
Mm.
last 5 or 6 years of Morgan. And that does good things for your mental health as well as
Absolutely.
physical
Absolutely.
health.
Yes.
And also makes me feel like I'm not, uh, if I can get on and off a bike easily, if I can fall on my bike and get myself back up again, I'm not
Mhm.
that old.
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely not.
it's
Absolutely not.
mentally good.
So, in conducting your audit, uh, were there things not necessarily about the next job that you didn't want to do? Were there things about yourself that you said, now that this transition happened, involuntarily, these are also things about myself that I don't want
Yeah.
to take with me in the next
Mm.
chapter?
Yeah. I I think you knew my partner. I think you may have met him at some social
Yes,
Yes,
we did
events,
meet
we
him.
did.
And you know, one of the things that I most admire about him and most appreciate about our time together was that I always felt like I was his priority,
Mm.
in the sense that he would think about something I would enjoy or would find funny, you know, would do something just that showed his thoughtfulness.
Right.
And I felt like I wanted to be more like him.
Mm.
And,
Mm.
you know, and whether it's in a relationship or just friendships or
Right.
a work, like there was somebody who did something just extraordinary. And I want to make myself more like him in that way.
Hmm.
So that was, I mean, when you talk about inventory,
Yeah.
you know, that
Mm.
was one of the things of just saying, look, I've had the benefit of a great example and someone I really admire.
Right.
So I want to try and be more like that myself.
I like that. I like that introspective, right? So even though the relationship has ended, you still can hold on to the qualities that were dear,
Yeah.
and that's so important. So Tom, I guess as we shift and get ready to end this part of the conversation again, because we're friends, and so just happy to be connected. Um, as people are thinking about this chapter, this phase, what's something that no one tells you that that you're not prepared for? So the part of losing a title or losing a relationship that no one warned you about.
I would say for me, it's financially realizing that you don't have an infinite amount of time to work. So um, you don't just assume there's going to be a bonus next year, and that was a change. So that I don't. I mean, I think I knew, in a financial planning perspective, that I needed to be able to kind of live without
Mhm.
other outside income, whatever, right? So yeah, I had thought about that, but I didn't. The reality of um, if I spend that money this year, then I've got to give up something next year, or you know what I mean? Like that's
Mhm, mhm,
it.
mhm.
It just the trade offs are more immediate than I was used to after having had a successful career that went on and on. Right.
Right.
So I guess I developed some bad habits, but, but it was like I knew it at one level, but experiencing it.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of my single women friends, and they feel probably really keenly of no one is going to be there to take care of me. I've got to take care of myself.
Mm.
And so I don't think I had experienced it to quite that same extent
Mhm.
Mm.
until all these changes happen.
Yeah.
Mm.
I can relate to that. I think I did share with you on a call about my own career transition and um as well. And so I think also not necessarily it surprised me, but I think paying attention to it more during this time is that so many of the expenses, the things that we spend, that I spent money on, and I was like, why did I do that? Like it's just an automatic thing. It's like
Yeah.
on autopilot. And really, when I now look at it, I'm like, these are ridiculous things
Yeah.
Mm.
that it's it, there's other ridiculous things that could be have more priority than the
Right.
ones that have it on autopilot. Not to
Yeah.
say everything you spend your money has to have this life purpose,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but when
There's
you
some level of
really take an audit, I think during
discipline.
that time, you're like, I spent this money every month or every week. Why? Why
Yeah.
do I do that? I
Mm.
think that's one of the things for me that was, again, a little bit surprising, but
Yeah.
when you really have to take a hard look at that.
Yeah. It reminds me of something from a book that I've loved for decades. But when I came out, was the beginning of the AIDS epidemic.
Mm.
And so, in fact, when I very first came out, it was still called GRID, gay related immune deficiency,
Mm.
I don't even
and
think I've ever
I
heard that
wasn't aware of
term.
that.
or immune disorder. I can't remember which it was, but anyway, and then quickly became AIDS. But then it took a while before it was HIV. But in any
Mm.
event, it was in that early era, it was very much a death sentence.
Right.
I mean, if
Mm.
you contracted AIDS, you were going to die.
Hmm.
In fact, one of my closest friends received his diagnosis. Sorry, I haven't thought about this for a while. On his 30th birthday, I was living in LA. We were at
Wow.
Cedars-Sinai Hospital, bringing birthday cake to his hospital room, and he had just been told that he had AIDS, and he passed away about 14 months later. Um,
Wow.
but there was an author at the time, Paul Monette, one of my favorite authors, wrote a bunch of books, but one that he wrote was called Borrowed Time, and it was the experience of losing his partner,
Hmm.
and then Paul himself died of AIDS some years after that. But one of the things he said in that book that has stayed with me is that as Roger, his partner, got sicker and sicker, their world got smaller and smaller. And he
Mm.
said the metaphor that he used was the layers of the onion. And he said, it turns out there's no end of layers to peel away as your life gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think about that in terms of we, life can force us to recognize some aspects that we can be happy without. But how much better off would we be if we don't wait to be forced, but really take that inventory ourselves and say, okay,
Yeah.
does this meaningfully improve my life? Does it allow me to be more useful to other people around me? Does it do something that's going to bring happiness to me and those nearby? And I don't think I know, speaking for me, I did not really examine that to the extent that I might have before I needed to.
Mhm.
And maybe that's something that you really only do when you have to, but maybe it's also a useful tip to someone who thinks there may be some changes coming up, just to really think through over a period of time, what is meaningful to me? What do I want to be sure I can continue to do regardless? And what would I not do? What would I give up? What can I live without in order to be able to focus on what brings greatest value?
That is the perfect thought and questions for us to end
Yeah.
this conversation,
Absolutely.
right? So taking stock. I mean, there's so much that I'm walking away with from this conversation, being that introspective, asking those the questions, right? What are the things that I enjoy doing? What are the things that bring me into spaces of giving back, community? And then should there come a time when there's a sacrifice, right? So begin to think about that. What are the things that I must have, or what are the things that I can absolutely eliminate?
Yeah.
For me, it's, community is a big one that it's, and community / volunteering, but also your comment now, not waiting until you're forced to do that audit and doing it when you are in plenty,
Yeah.
and asking those questions of, is this really something that brings me joy? Is this something, is it a good use of my time? Or am I just doing this because I'm on autopilot?
Okay.
Yeah. So
Really
I
true.
think those are definitely things, that we should be, as part of our pause, to think about,
audit.
and not waiting until that transition happens. But it's just something that, we should be thinking about, as mentioned, when we are in plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you so much.
for
And it's so good to virtually see
be
you.
with you.
But
Yeah.
but I'm really happy of you rubbing in the palm trees in our faces.
No.
I think so fondly of our time together, and
Fond
I
memories here as well.
respect you both so much, and really, I'm just delighted that at this new venture you've taken on. I'm eager to stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, Tom.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
your
for
time.
joining
Thank you
us.
and thank you just for being so transparent and, really honest about, everything that you've gone through.
Absolutely, Tom.
Really, really love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Wishing you the best, and
thank you.
hopefully, you're navigating the career and the volunteerism, and so wishing you a relationship as well.
Oh, thank you. So when you get to your 100th podcast,
Yes.
why not let's do it together again, but come to Hawaii this time, and we'll
That
all of
sounds
us sit here
wonderful.
with the palm trees.
Put that
I'm
out there in
packed.
the universe.
I'm packed. I'm ready.
Let's make that a priority.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks, Tom, and
Thanks, Tom.
cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for
So
joining us.
great. Thank you. See you soon, I hope.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right. And
Bye.
thank you all for joining us for another episode of the After Chapter podcast. Thanks for spending time with us on the After Chapter podcast.
Like, follow, subscribe, and share. Until next time, pause,
take
take a sip,
and
and stay with what's unfolding.